very soon the expectation is that all PMs will be pushing code to production.
Design teams, engineering teams, product teams are all mashing together into this big ball of prototyping and just getting ideas out.
Before 0 to 1 team, you'd have like a PM, a designer, and five engineers. Now you could probably get away with 2 or 3 of them.
Was it existential for Grammarly?
We had to basically disrupt ourselves and go after it or pack our bags.
Welcome to Prompted, a podcast about AI, people, and the creative spark. I'm Cameron Adams, co-founder and chief product officer of Canva. AI is definitively changing how we work and how products get built. Today, I am excited to nerd out about product with a fellow CPO I truly admire, Noam Lovinsky. Noam has helped build new products at Meta. He's led product and growth at Thumbtack, a marketplace for finding and hiring local professionals. And he has shaped how billions of people experience YouTube after his company was acquired there. He's now at Superhuman, which was formerly Grammarly. Noam is helping rethink what writing, thinking, and creative work look like in an AI-first world. Noam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Cameron.
It is amazing to have you here. You've got so much experience and I think so much growth to come in the AI world as well. I am so keen to tap into it. But first, we want to get to know you a little better by diving back into your childhood. And we'd love to get everyone to start by drawing something from their childhood that inspired them while you tell us the story about it. So you get 90 seconds to do this. You got to talk and draw at the same time. Right. Do you think you can multitask?
I think so.
All right, we'll set the timer and let's go.
Like many folks, I kind of got into what I'm into because of video games initially. Of course, yeah. The thing that I thought of that like really inspired me from my youth was actually when I created a bulletin board system. I don't know if you remember what a bulletin board system is.
You mean you're connecting through your modem?
Correct. I was connecting through my modem. I was learning how to go around what was then kind of like the bulletin board system to download things and get games and basically like steal software. And
you're a wares hacker.
Yes, exactly. And then I got inspired enough that I wanted to build my own BBS, and so I built my own BBS. It was called Crash Landing.
Right.
I was the sysop. It was my screen name was Marvin the Martian, and it was a 0-day wares BBS. And one of the things that I remember I built it in Wildcat. You know, one of the community members was like a really good ANSI artist. Do you remember like ANSI art, like from back?
I spent a lot of time doing some text designs in ANSI.
Oh, nice. Right on. And so you always like, as it's kind of loading, you'd have like a little loading animation came in, and he like created this really cool ANSI art that would come in down with basically like Marvin the Martian crashing on Mars. So that was my very terrible sketch of here is Marvin the Martian in his little shuttle crashing down on the surface of Mars, which was the loading screen when you came to Crash Landing and then found your way to download the latest 0-day wares or other media that you might be interested in as a youth.
I love that, Noam. I think we just alienated 90% of our audience that have no idea what the hell we're talking about. Yeah. But I personally love it. That is exactly why we dive into people's childhood to figure out what makes them them. Little secret, Marvin the Martian was actually my favorite Warner Brothers character as well.
Oh, wow.
So I think we can bond on
already.
That
Simpatico.
Well, let's send this picture to Alvin, who's our designer in residence, and he's going to team up with AI to whip it into something new. We will reveal what Noam, Alvin, Marvin the Martian, and AI all come up with at the end of this episode, so stay tuned for that. While Alvin works, though, let's go deep on AI with you, Noam. I'm excited to talk to you today because you have such a long history building product, and you've been at the forefront of this AI evolution or revolution since it started. So I'd love you to tell us a bit about how you got to Grammarly and what kind of led you there and the product progression that you've been through your career.
I've started a few companies, most of them glorious failures, a handful of mediocre successes in there. One of the successes, as you mentioned, is what brought me to YouTube, and I think that's where I really had my first realization and spark that this AI thing is going to be pretty big. And then at Meta, also worked on things related to machine assisted creativity and those sorts of things in that group that really got us inspired, but was still kind of pre LLM. Was more kind of the generative or the adversarial networks like the GANs that were doing that sort of thing.
What did draw you to Grammarly? What made you say these guys have it and they're going to be leading the way in the AI world?
When I first heard of Grammarly, I think they were like, their Series B or their Series C. And the argument against them was, hey, everyone is building in, kind of grammar and error checking into the various services. It's coming to Word. It's coming to Google Docs. Like, why does this business make sense? And the argument was like just very simple, which is like, we spend time in many more text boxes than you realize in a given day. And people really create like a bond and affinity to that thing that can help them everywhere they write. And it was that, I would say, trusting, deep relationship that Grammarly has with its customers. If you think of what like our customers hire us to do, the Grammarly part of our product anyway, it's basically to be in between them and every single thing they write on their device. And they trust us to be obviously a shepherd of their words, but also to give them advice on how their ideas can be better understood and how they can come through in a way that others will understand them. And it just felt very underleveraged, if I could just be really honest. It's like you've built this incredible infrastructure that integrates with all of these apps. You're running, billions of model calls and now LLM calls as people write at scale and, to 40 million DAO, and actually getting that to be from a latency and cost perspective, like a high, margin business. And what you're doing with all of that is like helping people correct their words. That's incredible, but you could be doing so much more.
Presumably Grammarly has concept of memory. Before memory was fashionable, and I think memory is quickly becoming one of the moats that AI companies build, is like understanding people and being able to react to them. Presumably Grammarly was doing that long before LLMs were on the scene.
Yes, and I think it was limited to how people wanted to come off in their writing, their tone, their personality, their preferences, those sorts of things. But actually, it's now that we're adding that the third leg to our stool. So I think our core differentiators is that we are ubiquitous. We work everywhere you work. We are proactive. We try to help you without you necessarily having to ask us for help. You don't have to come and prompt us to get something from us. And now we're adding that third leg of connected, where we understand you, your work, what you're trying to get done. And now the range of like jobs to be done that we can service, the range of tasks that we can help you service, is just much, much broader. But it's built on that same kind of fundamental relationship infrastructure, that trust to be attached to the user everywhere they go, rather than in any kind of one application, that I think is the real kind of powerful relationship with the customer that allows us to do many more things for them beyond what we've been doing up until now.
I don't think there's anyone on the planet who hasn't seen a Grammarly YouTube ad. I think they pretty much popularize YouTube ads in that form of marketing. So there's like an immense amount of brand equity there in the Grammarly name. But you've recently pivoted the whole company to now be called Superhuman. And I imagine this is all part of becoming an AI first company and really leaning into this new direction that you're heading. But I'm really fascinated with this transition you've made, both in brand and also in culture and product, to become an AI first company, because I think many people could use it as a case study for their own organizational transformation. So I'd love to start diving into that and think about the early days. When you first came into Grammarly, was this on the cards, or is this something that evolved as you've been there?
We really made this a refounding moment for the company. That's the way we treated it internally. We brought together obviously a few different companies. We'll continue to do that, but we took this renaming of the company as a refounding moment updated our mission, changed our charter and kind of like our reason for being, our manifesto, and then obviously expressed that through the brand. It's a very challenging thing to do because it's like, we sometimes talk about analogy, like it's really hard to rename your like 15-year-old child, which is, about how Grammarly, how old Grammarly was. It's even harder to like bring like a 10-year-old child into the family and actually say, oh, actually your name is now the 15-year-old's name and you've got a new name. Essentially what we did, and it's quite challenging, just even kind of keeping it all in your head internally, let alone rolling it out to our customers in a way that makes sense. But it wasn't something that popped on the scene after I arrived. The Grammarly founders and leadership team always had broader aspirations, and although the Grammarly brand I think is a very good name and a very good brand that we're still investing in, it's not going anywhere. There's a ton of valuable brand equity in that. I think they realized like very early on that it didn't have the elasticity necessary to match our ambition, that what we wanted to help people with, the idea of machine assisted communication, went much further than helping you fix your spelling and grammar everywhere you went, right? And it's about communication and understanding and alignment, and kind of how do you, when machines can really help you do that in a very real way in your day-to-day work, what are all the things that you'd be working on? What are all the use cases that you would take on? So I think that was very much in the air, and it was really just a matter of a question of when would we be ready to kind of make that transition, and how.
Was it also an existential moment? Because I can see a lot more people going to Claude, ChatGPT to get their writing done, to get suggestions, to do spell check and grammar and all the things, tidy up their prose.
I think it was existential. I wish that like practically it manifested itself in even more existential ways. Like what I'm trying to say is, sometimes you need like the numbers to like very clearly tell you it's existential and you got to go. And I think with Grammarly, the numbers are not actually like, don't send that clear of a signal.
Well, 40 million daily active users is incredible still.
Yeah, it's an almost $1 billion business. It's like, it's a healthy and kind of growing overall as a business. But I think it's obviously obvious to the founders and obvious to the leadership team that this idea of machine assisted communication, machine assisted collaboration was just leaping into a very different era, and we had to basically disrupt ourselves and go after it, or pack our bags. And I think they made the right choice.
Sounds like acquisition is part of the strategy here of like bringing more products into the fold. You brought on Coda, you brought on Superhuman, the mail platform. Were those kind of products, did you go out and strategize and figure out the right one, or were they opportunistic? How did the thinking go on that?
M&A is always like a little bit of a combination of, I would hope, of strategy and some opportunistic, because the things you want to join forces with are not always available. No, it was very much part of the strategy. I think we knew early on, what one of my colleagues, Ben Barkley, who runs Corp Dev here, he said to me once, like, Grammarly is a fantastic moat, but it doesn't have a castle. That says something about how Grammarly works. It works everywhere you work. It's always available. It's proactive. But when you said, hey, I go to Grammarly, like, what would you say? Like, there's not a destination or a very like popular destination. We do actually have a document editor that is actually where we see some of our most dedicated and high upgrade rates from our users. So that was one signal that there's maybe some there. But we knew that we would need a few castles in here as well. And the nice thing is that we had this really incredible moat that people loved that could actually help us launch some castles, right? It could help us grow some of those castles faster than they might grow themselves, because if they were basically complementary with the sort of jobs our users wanted done, our customers wanted done, and then certainly if we would offer it to them at a price that they felt was fair or whatnot. The assumption is if they like one of the products, then they may like some of the others. That is proving out. We knew that those destinations would be required, and then we basically looked at like, where do people use Grammarly most? And it's probably not all too surprising to you that a document editor and email are very high on the list of where people engage with Grammarly, and it makes sense. I think those are indeed the sorts of surfaces that are like prime real estate for redefining how they might work with AI. It's the systems where you either address other people or to kind of like delegate things to other people, or it's the systems where you're already actively collaborating with people, put an artificial person in there and think about how your collaboration might change. And I think it really fundamentally rethinks those systems and those surfaces. So it just made sense for us to play there.
I think having those services and those channels will become increasingly important in the AI world, because that's where value actually gets delivered. You can work with your AI assistant, day and night, but actually getting that stuff out there to other people on your team, to your audience, that's where the value is. And increasingly owning those channels, I think, will become the way that companies establish themselves.
Totally.
Bringing in Coder and Superhuman in particular, we're also looking at bringing in AI first culture, giving a bit of an injection of AI first thinking.
Grammarly's been like AI since the very beginning. It was just like different generations of AI. So I think that the idea of basically how you think and build in a model first way, and how you think about product quality and eval and kind of all of those things, I think we're already like pretty native to Grammarly. LLMs as a platform, given generation of ML that we were like using before that, changes timescales and like kind of how you would solve the problems. But I think that like otherwise it's similar thinking. It was less about kind of injecting kind of AI native culture. Honestly, it was just much more about like rapid product expansion. That we had this beloved thing that was very horizontal. It helped you write everywhere you wrote. If we wanted to expand from that horizontal to either vertical specific tasks or other horizontal applications that revolve around kind of communication and writing and collaboration, like which way would we go, and what would make sense, and we obviously chose, rather than going very vertical specific, like a very like vertically integrated SaaS solution, for example, we went with the other parts of the typical productivity suite that we think have real opportunity for reinvention, given what these models can do now.
And obviously, you're building tools for other people to employ AI, but we're also seeing that AI is transforming us internally incredibly as well. Our tool set is changing, the way that we work and build products is changing incredibly. Design teams, engineering teams, product teams are all mashing together into this big ball of prototyping and just getting ideas out. I'm fascinated to hear how it's working for you internally, for your product teams. Has it drastically changed the way you deliver product?
We are definitely getting there. It's funny. Like last week, I ran a PM offsite, and it was all about AI coding, because I really feel like since November, December, it's just gotten to a point where it's good enough that even with like a mild technical understanding or even no technical understanding, you could be very, very productive if you just kind of learn the tool set and how to work with it.
Everyone's talking about how the last 3 months has just totally changed code.
Yeah, I can only imagine what the rest of the year is going to be like, because we're 1 month in, and I just feel like it's been already head spinning in terms of the pace. The number of things that I'm playing with and trying to learn to just kind of keep a pace is pretty large. But and certainly in our like engineering culture, everyone is using AI assisted IDEs. We're doing a lot more kind of agent driven development. We're building the systems around that. That is definitely, I think, in a maturing stage in terms of how deeply AI is being integrated into the development process. Also on design, obviously, I still think that there's very much space for a canvas, a whiteboard. Like, I don't think those things go away, but obviously our designers are also doing far more prototyping, far more quickly, and also contributing to production code. And with PMs, similarly, like I would love them to get to the point where our PMs are regularly, pushing PRs to engineers that don't want to make engineering tear their hair out, but that more of the group is just involved in each part of the product development process, because I think that'll just lead to better products.
Being a PM means many different things depending on which organization you're at. A large part of some organizations, PMs are all about defining the spec and like making sure the spec makes sense before shipping it off to design or engineering, because that's where the long tail of work happens. But increasingly, we're now seeing engineers and designers just like build the thing, and that becomes the spec. What do you think the role of a PM then is in that sort of world?
I've always felt that PM was less of a role and just more of a skill set. And you sort of morphed and adapted to like what the project needed. And I think that fundamentally each of these roles just has to become much more of a builder. The cycle from we have some ideas with conviction to we have something that is clearly resonating with our customers can just shrink dramatically. And so I think in that environment, a PM got to be part designer, part researcher, part engineer. They should be able to, take an idea and turn it around in 24 hours and get real signal that would kind of build their conviction, their intuition, and help them, and the team basically chart the course to the right product. But I think that's not unique to PM. I think that designers are going to have to, and the best designers already do. They're like very, very product minded. They're also like have empathy for engineering, and same is true for engineering. The best engineers are very product minded. They don't just think about how to build the thing. They also get deeply involved in what should be built and why. Like we see typically in startups that are like 5 to 10 people, there's just a lot of role collapsing. It's not like you do this and we just all do everything. And I'm excited now that many more of us have the tools such that we can express those skills that we likely already have, but just more broadly, and all of us can work more the same way that we might have when we were 5 people in a room or 10 people in a room.
Are you actually seeing more product get out the door now as opposed to prior to the AI era, or is it having slightly different effects?
I definitely think we like our product acceleration, our velocity is increasing, and the amount that we're doing is increasing. But I still think, honestly, the biggest bottleneck is on deciding kind of what to build of the various things that the options that we have, and then kind of getting to the signal and conviction that it is indeed the right thing, and then kind of to deploy it further. I think we need to get a lot more comfortable with trying things and throwing them away more quickly. When the rate of learning can decrease quite significantly, then obviously the cost of doing these things and throwing these things away like reduces as well. And I think we can start operating in a very, very different environment. But you still have to be intentional, right? I've been in a number of organizations where like we quickly kind of mistake like motion for progress, and it's like, the CEO said there's this area of interest. Everyone kind of go in this area of interest. I hope that doesn't come about as much, but we are seeing acceleration, and we'll see acceleration in the kind of like deciding what to do and build phase.
You've argued that chat shouldn't be the primary interface for AI. And I'm interested in what you mean by that and how that's affecting the product that you're rolling out at Superhuman.
I think chat is now a UX primitive in the same way that button or like dropdown is. Like, when the machine has the capabilities that it has, obviously you should be able to chat with it and talk to it and those sorts of things. And I think chat is a very powerful paradigm where you can get a lot done. That is a very nice kind of portable paradigm as well that works across many surfaces and devices. But I just think fundamentally it's not where we spend the majority of our time when we work. The majority of the time is spent in the like artifacts that we make and how we collaborate around those artifacts and their ability to kind of get us to decision alignment, work, whether that's like code or docs or presentations or design files or whatnot. So chat will be a primitive in those applications in the same way that buttons are. But I think the idea that each of those applications and way of working with AI should be designed chat first is what I believe a little bit less.
Is it still interacting with an agent though, just through a different UI? Maybe you're clicking a button or you're speaking to it, or is it something more fundamental, like it's always on and it's just changing the stuff underneath you?
It could very much be that the latter thing you described. That's what I sort of have in my mind. Like what is a canvas that's alive and actually writing with you? What does that feel like? Right now, do we personify that as an agent and give it a little presence indicator and cursor because it's a familiar convention, and that's a bridge from kind of where we are now to the next phase. But what does it feel like when it's a proactive canvas that can, write with you, very literally? How does it react to you? How does it act as sort of like a thinking partner? Different stages of the process. I think that you need kind of like direct manipulation and kind of other UX conventions to do a really good job of that, where just like chatting back and forth can actually feel very low bandwidth at certain times. That's sort of what I have in mind.
Yeah, we certainly see this in the visual realm. Canva is all about creating amazing visuals, and often trying to describe the right image or trying to point to that thing just using text is incredibly hard. So we're constantly thinking about the interface that people need to more effectively work with visual content.
We haven't really even, I'd say, scratched the surface on vision, a computer vision as yet another input device. Just a simple thing that you just said of, I move my mouse over here and kind of wiggle it and say something about an area. That as like an input indicator, when you think about what that could turn into, I think it's a very powerful new vector that we've just barely scratched the surface on, and how that might work. This is like, I think, an early example of how would you design the thing differently if it could respond to those sorts of interactions.
I love talking about the philosophy of AI and product, but a lot of listeners get value out of hearing about the really practical and tactical ways in which you're using AI. So I'd love to kind of get a rundown maybe of your day and how you've started to incorporate AI into that, and how it's helped you evolve the way in which you work.
Certainly, like in areas of like search and knowledge, and certainly in coding and building, I'm spending a lot of time using these tools. 'Cause I think like once you really start to feel what is it like to have this thing that I can delegate real tasks to and then kind of do them end to end, you start to feel the magic. And I think in knowledge work, we're still scratching the surface in that, but in the coding world, we're very much there. So it's nice to live in that world and feel what that kind of interaction pattern feels like when the machine can work in that way. But maybe like just a couple of practical things that I do. I probably, like you, for better or worse, I'm in a lot of meetings. And one of the things that I do very intentionally with my meetings right now, especially meetings that the main purpose of them is to generate something out of that meeting, to communicate, to transmit the signal from that meeting more quickly, more broadly, so that then we could have, get to shared context and alignment and kind of making a decision. A lot of times I will structure that meeting and the way that we run that meeting around, AI is going to help us produce the artifact out of this. And that's not only about we're recording the meeting in a particular way, that's also about like what we say, how we kind of, break things down, kind of checkpoint the meeting, create like kind of summaries that we know later is going to make it a lot easier to.
Are you talking to the AI? Are you like, AI, please note this bit and make sure it comes through?
No, not that yet, but I do think that's coming. It's like some of the things that we think about is like, what if you we just hook up our, go to Coda and actually just have it like, not just transcribing, but actually generating the document kind of live in the room. What might that feel like if we just had that up on the screen and we could see how we are affecting the editing and generation of the document. But right now it's just mainly when we speak, do a checkpoint, summarize things, knowing that after the fact we're going to take that transcript, dump it into Go and have it use like the Coda MCP to help us start generating the artifact and then kind of working with the artifact there.
It's actually been amazing seeing the progression in just meeting note taking. Like, you figure it's a pretty easy thing, and we've used Zoom transcripts for a long time. But there's a whole swathe of new products coming through that enable you to record your meetings. And they are doing an incredible job of transcribing it, but then translating that into action. And I think that last step is the critical one. Getting those really actionable points at the end of the meeting is one of the most powerful things AI can do to help you constantly move things forward, rather than just have this massive data that no one pays attention to.
Exactly. Like, I think that there's this sort of like, there's this compression of signal transmission from kind of each, kind of interaction at work. Like a meeting is high signal, but also just like high noise. Like that's just
Mm.
how humans communicate. I think that's part of being human. That's good. But then like how quickly can you extract the signal out of that meeting, compress it into something that many more humans can, follow along? The amount of time and effort to do that has just dramatically reduced, and I think that actually changes the velocity of an organization. I've often thought, and one of the things that I'm playing with is actually just taking my all my meeting transcripts from the day and saying these are the meetings I don't want you to share, but otherwise summarize, note the actions and just put them in a public channel where anyone in the company, if they want, could just follow along. And if they want to see like what am I spending my day on, because so much of my job is creating shared context across these product areas and these teams. And it's very rare that I'm in a meeting or even a one-on-one where like the whole company could like know about that meeting if there was a kind of a low effort, high signal way to consume that, and it wouldn't just kind of take up all their time following my meetings.
I love that idea. That sharing that context across a much wider group is extremely valuable. It actually reminds me of some old school advice that I was reading from a great business leader. And he always said that after every meeting, he would actually take 5-10 minutes and just write down his thoughts and the next action steps from it. And I think it's something that a lot of us don't do. We're in back-to-back Zoom
Yep.
meetings, we're jumping from call to call, and we don't take that time to reflect. And with these AI tools now, it's giving you the ability to do that instantaneously, which is amazing and incredibly valuable.
Totally. And it's not only obviously really good shared context for the other humans you're working with, but you're actually building up incredible shared context for all these agents that are going to be roaming around trying to help you on your behalf. Like what I think about, like what is some of my best ways to help the team is to sit down and write a memo or write like a strategy document, something that can kind of in a higher signal way transmit like some of the decision making and context. And it used to just be that was just a real drag. Basically I'd do meetings all day long, and then sometime after after dinner I'd log back on, and then those would be my like 3 or 4 hours of quiet writing time at night, and it would be hard to get a document out regularly or many documents out regularly. And now just the way that we can write documents, like we basically we take something like Go, we hook it up with the Coda MCP. I basically feed it the context, which is the meeting transcript and maybe some examples of previous work, or it automatically goes and knows what I'm writing and grabs, the examples from previous work. And then I'm just start jotting down my thoughts. And it is constantly marking things up, leaving comments where it can fill in the gaps and expand things. And I'm just going through and like accepting comments, suggesting something slightly different. And it's this very interesting sort of like active writing loop where I'm kind of just more stream of consciousness, getting kind of my general thoughts down, and it's kind of like constantly coming up behind me, refining, and it just I don't know how to say it, but it's just a much faster writing loop because I'm just spending less time in my head and more time just getting it out, and it's also just super fun. It's the same reason that like I can't stop coding with AI, because it's just a really fun way to build things if you've built things, and especially in the old way of building things. And now you bring that sort of like active collaboration feeling of this thing is alive and doing it with me, and it's just way more fun. It also has got this almost like video game feel to it right now, and maybe that's like novelty for now, but it's a draw because it's both more quick and more fun.
I feel like we've gotten pretty good at pushing out content with AI, but we probably don't have enough in terms of consuming. And
Yeah.
there's this notion that, different people prefer different formats. Like you can convert a
Yeah.
doc into a podcast, etc. But do you imagine this world where your AI agent's pushing out content, my AI agent is sucking it in and then condensing it, so it doesn't really matter whether it's slop or there's like 15 paragraphs, it's going to condense it down into the two that I really want.
To be honest, that sounds like a little bit like fantasy to me.
Fantasy or dystopia?
Yeah, what I mean is I don't think it's going to work that way, at least anytime soon. I think that there's still the very important kind of human judgment of this is worth, like, I verified that this is worth reading. And my hope is that just because we can do much more of this doesn't mean that we will just indiscriminately do much more of this. There's still going to be a good amount of human in the loop kind of trying to make that judgment and figuring out what are the right rituals or the right way to align humans in order to work with AI. I think alignment of the model is very challenging, but actually I think it's much more challenging to figure out how to align the human interactions and the human ways of working to take advantage of the model and take advantage of the other humans. And so I think we're still going to have to do a lot of work there.
I'm with you on that one. I definitely want AI to enable a more human world rather than a less human world. You started talking about teams before and how you're sharing context and how AI is enabling that. But I'm sure you're also thinking a lot about how your team uses AI, the tools they use, the workflows they have. So I'm interested in how you're thinking about that and how you encourage your teams to embrace AI as well.
Just doing a whole PM offsite where that was like the entire agenda, and we built a curriculum around it. We also just do more organic things like, AI Fridays, have people share in the various communities and groups how they're using it. We put it in our all hands. It's in our interview process for every function. So we try to find more of those kind of organic ways of just kind of breathing into the culture. We're not yet at the point where we're like evaluating people based on that and checking how much of your code was AI assisted versus you or anything like that. There's a lot of interesting dynamics to that. We're not there yet, but otherwise also just try to create space where just talking to the teams very intentionally to say, like, you should get together as a team and decide who's going to be accountable for what. How might that change? How do you want to change your rituals and your processes to say, like, you can have the time to actually do all this part of the work, rather than being on the hook for the same things that you're currently on the hook for. Because I think actually that's the most challenging thing, is the change management within the organization, the teams, around what should a good week look like? How should I kind of spend my time? What do you do? What do I do? Like, kind of, and giving each other not only the space and the grace to kind of form those new rituals and new ways of working, but then also the time to kind of do the learning and adopt it.
And you're not being prescriptive about that as a leader?
Not yet. As prescriptive as I've gotten is kind of the message at the offsite to PMs, for example, is very soon the expectation is that all PMs will be pushing code to production. So let's get ready for that. We can create some of those aspirational North Stars that even if we don't get all the way there, like, the progress we make on the way to that is, I think, quite substantial. Or like the North Star of how can we make sure that every PM can build an idea and get customer feedback within 24 hours on almost any idea that they have. We want to be able to build like that soon across the board, have that be a tool at your disposal should you choose that makes sense for that project, for that problem. I think kind of setting some of those North Stars and then pushing aggressively towards them is, at least for my team, I would say, more inspiring and motivating than the stick. I think the carrot is a little bit more interesting. And we're here in tech and in the Bay Area. I think everyone really understands that they have to learn this stuff. They're all trying to learn this stuff to stay relevant in their jobs. So I don't feel there's already a very natural pull. I feel like I more need to clear the way and maybe create some, aspirational milestones that are aggressive, that will kind of force that transition.
Are you starting to see AI actually change the structure of your teams as well? Do you need less teams? Do you need less people at your organization to build product now?
I don't know about you, but I have never been part of an organization that has a finite list of things they want to build.
That's very true. Very true.
I always have an infinite list of things that we want to build. And I do think that we'll just end up doing more. Products like both of ours will take on more jobs to be done, kind of will become bigger bundles, and we'll just do more for customers, and customers decide what, kind of what choices they want to make in terms of what solutions for which problems they want to they want to hire. But I do think that the makeup of a team can change quite a bit. Maybe before a 0 to 1 team, you'd have like a PM, a designer, and five engineers. I think now you could probably get away with like a designy PM, an engineer, or a producty designer and an engineer. They can get pretty far, just like two or three of them. That's very exciting, and I would just have more of those sorts of teams, not do fewer things.
I imagine from the way the Superhuman's going, you've talked about agents, that we're going into this world where people are managing agents a lot more. And perhaps that's what a product manager does, it's not a manager of products anymore, it's a manager of agents that manage products. But how are you thinking about structuring our interactions with it? Do we have the tools right now and even the mental skills to be able to manage 50 different agents all going off and doing these different things and reporting back to us?
Do we have the full set of tools? No. As PMs, typically you're good about thinking about outcomes, managing towards outcomes. What are you trying to achieve on the other side of the work? What problem are you trying to solve for your customer? What might it look like when that problem is solved? And I think that sort of thinking and those sorts of skills are very useful for working with agents. I then think like, what sort of verification loops or systems can you put in place that are objective, or that you get close to objective through kind of your subjective guidance, that these agents can then use to check their own work and verify if they've done like your version of a good job of the job that you are setting them off to do. Again, like so many lessons from coding here, right? Where like I think that it's very obvious, like, hey, hook it up to a browser and let it like click around in the thing that it built and say, keep going until all the clicks work. It's a very like primitive, objective verification loop. How might you do that on more abstract and ambiguous concepts that you're trying to achieve as a PM? I think is a important skill set to think about. The other thing is just how are we going to decide and kind of develop like who is the arbiter of taste? Because I think so much of it is gonna come to that. Like, yes, it can do the job. What is the job well done? When it's a very objective thing, did compile, did not compile. A little bit easier to evaluate that. When it's like good UX or okay UX, a little bit harder to evaluate that. So, how are we going to hone those skills, and figure out kind of which part of that we can delegate and which part of that needs to very much stay the human taste and judgment? I think are really interesting questions.
I think we've covered a lot of ground in both AI and products. So I just have one last question for you, which is, what keeps you energized? What are you most excited about in the world of AI and product building for the next 3 years?
Man, there's so much. I feel like it's funny you start talking about childhood. I feel like so many things that were science fiction when I was a child are now like coming to pass. Like the idea of like robots in my house, as an example. The thing I'm like most excited about, is life extension. It's less about discovering ways to stay alive longer, which I'm sure we'll do as well. It's more about the time that I am alive, getting to use that time in ways that I want to use it more is really exciting to me. So I always give the example as I'm a power user of Waymo. I use it 2 or 3 times a day. I think I've clocked, it tells you, I think I've clocked like 10,000 minutes on Waymo or something like that. I see those minutes as life extension, because those are 10,000 minutes that I spent in a way that I actually wanted to spend them, rather than spending it driving, which is not what I want to be doing. It's a means to an end, obviously. I like a clean home, so I spend a lot of time cleaning my home, but like, I don't want to spend my time that way. That list is very long. So I'm excited for like kind of that sort of life extension.
I like that philosophy. That's really great.
Yeah.
Let's step away from AI for a sec. And I would love to dive into your all-star creative team. This is where you get to choose 4 people, any era, any universe, dead or alive, to be on your dream creative team. Who would they be?
start with writers, because I think so much of doing good creative work actually starts with writing.
Well, you're at the right company.
Yeah, yeah. But also just the way my brain works. I'd flip this one if you don't mind, but I would just pick like people that I know well, who I think are very talented at some of these disciplines, that I know I can just like really get good work done. So much of it is the facilitating the right group dynamic and so on. So my writer would actually be my wife. Who is a professional writer, and I think quite a good one. I would pick a very close friend of mine who's also like the co-founder at two of the companies that I started, who's like a very designy engineer that just has really good taste and can build just really beautiful product. I would then pick a friend of mine who's a storyboard artist at Pixar, who's just very creative, very good at storytelling. There's a product designer that I've had a chance to work with while he was at Uber that I would probably add to the team.
I love your take on that. It's not about having the biggest brains in the room. It's actually about having a proper team who cover all the bases and who work well together. And it's that synergy, I think, that creates the best products. So kudos for you for taking it in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Alvin has had just enough time to feed your sketch into AI. He's probably also gone off and researched about Marvin the Martian for about 20 minutes. Let's bring him back to see the final results of whatever this human AI human creation looks like. Did you know who Marvin the Martian was, Alvin?
I didn't know. I have to Google it.
You're allowed. That's very understandable.
But that's part of the process. In design, we have this saying that show, don't tell. But with AI, I feel like we're moving into experience, don't show, because people need to experience with things to believe in it. And so, Norm, inspired by your sketch and also your fascination about Marvin the Martian, I created this little interactive game where you can actually play.
Holy moly! Let's see it.
Nice. Very cool. You've gotten good at the game. You had gotten time to actually practice some reps.
Not good enough. Not good enough.
Well done, Alvin.
And that's
Very
using
cool.
the Martian.
Awesome.
That is the fastest on-brand vibe coding I've ever seen. Have
Thank
you
you
ever
very much.
seen yourself in a Centurion's outfit before, Noam?
This is great. I'd love the link when you're ready, Alvin.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
This can be your new avatar across Slack or whatever you use. Thank you, Alvin. That was amazing.
Thank you.
And that's it. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Noam, for going deep with me on your creative process, how you're using AI, how you're building teams, how you think about agents. It has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of Prompted, a podcast about AI, people, and the creative spark. To keep up with future episodes, please subscribe wherever you love to listen to podcasts or head on over to YouTube. Until next time, keep chasing that creative spark.